Wonderful. Brilliant. So thank you very much for coming and welcome to our development trainings talk tonight. We are lucky enough to have Mark Uren with us, who is part of the MOSOVO team in Devon. He's going to talk about his role, what a MOSOVO does, and how circles fit into that. So thank you so much for joining us, Mark. Over to you.
Yeah, good evening. Thanks very much for asking. Yeah, so if I talk a little bit about what we do, our roles, the qualifying people that we work with, and then we'll go on to look at how we assess people's risk of reoffending and what can be done to minimize that. And that's where we split risk factors to do with protective factors. And that's where you guys come into a massive support in promoting protective factors and people having something to basically be able to say, this is what I've got in my life and this is what I don't want to lose. And it's a really big factor in reducing reoffending. So yeah, if we go through a little bit at the first, if you have any burning questions, please shout up. I'm not the best with Zoom. We tend to use Teams at work, but I'll try and share a page which will show you the assessment form and a little bit about the definitions of what we're looking for. So if we go through any problems, yeah, if you want to ask some questions at the end, but if you have something along the ways and you just want to shout up, please just put your hand up and we'll see what we can do. And hopefully maybe Lucy can sort of see who's looking to shout in. So I've worked in the unit at the moment since 2017. MOSOVO, M-O-S-O-V-O, stands for Management of Sexual Offenders and Violent Offenders, but we predominantly work within the management of sexual offenders. There is another acronym which we do love in the police and anything to do with the criminal justice system, which is MAPPA. You'll maybe hear MAPPA categories and MAPPA offenders. So if somebody is a MAPPA, they call level 1, 2, or 3, and then we have categories 1, 2, and 3. We look at level 1, which is somebody who would be a registered sex offender, so convicted of a qualifying sexual offence. I don't like using the word "you are a registered sex offender." To me, it labels somebody which has got a negative connotation to it. You know, if you go in and say, "Oh yeah, you're a sex offender," it's just got that feeling of, well, if that's what you think I am, and it's a bit of a put down. So I don't like calling it so, but it is people that have got sexual convictions. So category 2 is the violent offenders, if they've been sentenced to a violent offence and 12 months or more in custody. And category 3 are other dangerous offenders who have committed sexual or violent offences in the past and considered to pose a risk. You will see a form that I've got there, which I'd be happy to email in, and which is basically detailing everything there. So if ever you've got a question, you can maybe go through Lucy or John and get a copy of that. So I'll send that on after. We then split into levels, level 1, 2, and 3. Level 1 is standard management by police and or probation. And then we can share information through statutory agencies through the MAPPA 1 process. The second level is a level 2, and that's where we look at thinking, well, maybe the police are involved, maybe the probation are involved. Who else do we need involved in the management of this person? Is it because someone's facing homelessness? Is it someone's facing mental health problems? Are they ill in any other ways? Are there any other issues? They're homeless, they've got drug addictions, alcohol addiction. It's then pulled together and it's chaired by either a senior probation officer and or inspector. And the good thing about this is it's very accountable, that anybody within the MAPPA 2 process is deemed to be higher risk. And any agencies that are requested to come to the meetings, it's not, you know, sort of, yeah, come along and see what's open to you, how you can help. It's what can you do above and beyond. So if you've got housing, we know we have a terrible situation with housing placements in Exeter. Whereas what we'd be looking at is what can you do to change that? What can you do to put this person higher up the list to deal with this person's concerns? And level 3 is a really high risk. So you may be looking at the imminent risk of reoffending. That's chaired by a superintendent level or a very, very senior probation officer. So if you look at 1 as in standard, number 2, very naughty, and level 3, very, very naughty. If we had level 3 people, I don't think they would be coming near yourselves as a referral, because I think they've got too much in their lives to sort out. And probably the same with level 2. We would be looking at really making sure that that risk has reduced before we put them into a referral into circles of support and accountability. So if we look at lengths of time on the sex offenders register, as it's called, or notification requirements, however you wish to refer to it as, if somebody has a police caution, which is a police conviction, but the matter does not go to court and it's diversion from court prosecution, that person is registered for 2 years. That means they have the sex offenders notification requirements, but they don't have any other orders. That goes up if someone has a community order at court, so someone's charged to court and is convicted, it goes up to 5 years. It then goes up to increments, 7 years. If someone has up to 30 months custody, whether that's suspended or in prison, it's 10 years, and anything more than 30 months is indefinite, which is including life sentences. Once somebody goes to court and someone had their conviction, police are involved, but also probation. So probation are the lead agency initially. They will run the case, because if somebody is, let's say, sentenced to 4 years in custody and in prison for 2 years, they come out for 2 years, they're still serving their sentence in the community. So at any stage, if their behaviour deteriorates or they commit another offence, then probation can recall that person to custody. So the police take a little bit of a step back, jointly managed, but probation are the people who are responsible for the overall running, and it's a lead agency, as we call. It comes on to then what we look at as in the risk of how somebody's managed, how we do it. It used to be a basically statutory sort of tick box assessment, where you would go out and look at how somebody offended, what they did, when they did it, was drink involved, was violence involved, how old were they when they did it, did they know the person, was it a stranger attack or not? And at the end of it, you pressed a button and it came up with a score of either low, medium, high, and that was it. The problem we had then is we all change in our lives. We all have good weeks, bad weeks. We have some good things happen to us in our lives. We have some bad things happen to us in our lives. And that was deemed to say, well, we've got something that's too static. Each time you go out and see somebody, no matter how good their life was or how bad their life was, we pressed a button at the end and it worked it out for us, this person's risk of reoffending. So people a heck of a lot cleverer than myself and paid a lot more came up with saying, well, actually, we need to have something fluid. So they brought in what they call the ARMS assessment, which is Active Risk Management System. So the active risk is, as I said just now, sometimes we will have times when our lives are good. Some things will happen. Some people will come into our lives that are good, positives for us. We'll have times when people come into our lives that are negative for us, or we may lose employment, or we may lose a relative, or we may start drinking. All the risks that can come and change people's lives, whether that's the risk of sexually reoffending, or you could really relate it to your own life. We all have ups and downs, it's how we cope with them. But if someone does have a conviction, we have to look at all the risk factors and are things happening to increase that risk. And we compare that to protective factors and say, well, are those protective factors there helping us keep that person away from reoffending? So that's where the active risk management came in, and it's split through 11 categories, through some risk factors and some protective factors. Where you guys come in, you are a massive, massive protective factor in people not reoffending, because it is that thing of having, a positive routine, social investment, meeting around positive people. If, say again, this is just life. If you put somebody and mix them with negative influences, there's a strong chance they'll behave that way. Introduce them to positives, there's a strong chance that they will react that way. So I'm going to try and share my screen now and show you some of the categories and just some highlights of key parts of the form. So let's look at that and share. And is that working? Right, okay, good. So I'm going to scroll down and we have the categories here to look at. I hope this doesn't make you feel dizzy. But we have the categories here. We have opportunity, that's opportunity to offend, sexual preoccupation, offence-related sexual interests. And as you can see, those three are quite powerful categories when it comes to someone with a conviction of a sexual nature. You need to be talking about them. We then look at emotional congruence with children, hostile orientation, poor self-management, social influences, commitment to desist, intimate relationship, employment or positive routine, and social investment, giving something back. So as you can see, there's quite a lot of categories, 11, in fact, that we'll see how somebody's life is progressing or possibly, you know, deteriorating at the time. And what we'll do is we'll look at them a little bit more detail and exactly what they show. So the big one is opportunity. So we look at whether someone has the opportunity to offend. We could look at all the other categories, which could be at high risk, but if someone doesn't have the opportunity to offend, they can't offend. If somebody is in prison, solitary confinement, in a hospital, subject to a hospital order, and they have all the sexual thoughts going through their heads, but they don't have the opportunity to offend, then they can't offend. But opportunity is our biggest risk factor, because if you go and start seeking out opportunities to offend, then you're really on a bit of a pathway to commit an offence, commit a second offence. So what we have to look at is that individual having access to, creating or seeking situations that provide him with the potential opportunities to offend. Excuse me. What I don't want to say here is that we're not going to be saying, oh, we're just going to say it's just men, but arms assessments are only at the moment conducted on adult males. They may be coming out for adult females and also may be coming out for juveniles, but they're looking at the definitions of the categories and they may need to be amended depending on someone's sexuality. So our opportunity is the big thing. Is someone having access to, so let's say somebody who has offended against a child, does that person have access to a child? And we're not talking about in any direct way, but maybe family members, maybe friends who have children, so we have to look at that. Or are they creating situations that provide them with the potential opportunities to offend? Can we be looking at someone who has now started a friendship, who has maybe a male started a friendship with a lady who has 2 children. So we're looking at situations that could provide with potential opportunities. And then what we do is we look at whether they are or whether they aren't, because it may well be that they're not having access to or creating or seeking situations, which is a real positive. So we could have somebody that's, you know, got a string of offences, but they're saying, do you know what, I don't want to be that person anymore. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I keep myself away from certain situations so I don't have the opportunity to offend. And then when we discuss that topic, we look at the items there, and it says high priority, medium or low. We have to rate whether there's a strong presence of the factor, partial presence of the factor, or the factor is not present at all. And we go on through these through the 11 categories in sexual preoccupation. And I don't wish it to be crude, but if you have somebody who may be being managed by police that's 18 years of age, we would probably expect someone's sexual preoccupation to be higher end of the scale than someone who may be in the 60s, 70s, even older. But it's about somebody that really has, as I've highlighted here, is the behavior and thoughts are more focused on sex than anything else in their lives. So it's not just a case of whether someone is sexually active or thinks about sex and maybe masturbates or has sex once a day or twice a week or 3 times a week. It's that thought of it's always on somebody's mind. It's the person that is always turning a conversation into something sexual, is looking at sexual related stuff on his phone or on his laptop, person that doesn't go to bed till 2, 3 in the morning, and then when you look at the internet history, it's just looking at, you know, sexual related objects. It's taking up their time. It can be described as an obsession, so much so that their everyday functioning is disrupted. We'll quite often go knock on somebody's door at 10 in the morning, still be in bed because they've been looking at sexual stuff through the night. So it's just that, you know, it's becoming an obsession, really. And then moving on to offence-related sexual interests. This is in relation to where their sexual interests are more easily gratified through offending than through legal consensual activities. If someone says, I have sexual thoughts of what I did, or I'm looking at pornography which depicts offences. So if somebody has contact offence against a child and they're looking at pornography which may be legal but is depicting you know, sex with a schoolgirl, or somebody that may be dressed up in a school uniform, a person that looks younger than what they are, that is offence-related sexual interest, because you've got somebody who should be looking at, maybe in his 40s, should be thinking about people his own age, not offence-related sexual interest. Again, they can be found by sometimes checking people's devices, if they've got internet-enabled devices. And one thing I didn't explain, sorry, earlier on, was although someone has notification requirements that puts them on the sex offenders registration for a period of time, we can also apply for a sexual harm prevention order. A sexual notification requirements, they're standard for everybody. The sexual harm prevention order is specific to their offending. So if you think somebody is offending online or using devices to access the internet, we can put restrictions on that. We can put monitoring software on their mobile phones, on the computers. We can take the computers away to examine it. We can prevent them from deleting their internet history. So rather than phoning somebody up and saying, I'm coming around to look at, see how you are, and they clear all their internet history and everything looks all fine, they're just looking at, you know, the local newspapers, we don't get a true picture. Whereas if they were to delete their history, we have monitoring software on, we would know that they've deleted it. So that they're very good tools. The sexual harm prevention order, you often speak to clients that will say, well, this is my order and I'm restricted from going here. They may have offended in a location that is frequented by children, so they may have restrictions that they can't go to certain buildings. So if you say, let's have our circles meeting outside and go somewhere, the person may say, well, actually, I can't go there because it's specifically meant for children or maybe leisure facilities. Okay. So those are the real big 3 risk factors that we have to assess at the start of the arms assessment. And that leads on to emotional congruence to children. People say, well, in what way? If you sort of think of at the far end of the scale, we'll say Michael Jackson is the person who wants to surround himself with young people, has interests that are liked by young people, go into someone's houses and they may have teddy bears, but it relates to people under the age of 14. So if you've got somebody who's 20, you know, they might be a bit younger for their age, but really, if they're over 18, shouldn't really be wanting to spend their time or have the same interests as someone under the age of 14. I mean, although this, you know, we do manage people that are not sex offenders against children, but this can still be relevant in to see where somebody's life is. Hostile orientation. So what we look at here is what we've highlighted: negative orientation to others or to rules, grievance thinking, callousness, and general hostility. We can all put on a front. We can all be very, very polite to people when we come around. When we come around, as a police come around to visit, because the person who's being visited knows that if they say everything, yes, no, everything's right, we'll be out of their way quicker. We look above and beyond that, because you might see general hostility used towards other professions, where it says here, has disregard for rules, intentionally breaks them with little regard to consequences. So we look at whether someone is actually engaging with us professionally, or they're just saying yes, no at the right time. If someone fails to make appointments, or intentionally seeks to make it difficult for professionals to engage, We look at the hostility. I always say that when we go out and speak with people, people may have done some terrible things, but we treat everybody the same as we'd like to be treated. So when we're meeting with somebody, when we're having a conversation, there is no talking down to someone. It's a general, you know, both adults, let's have an adult conversation about what's happened. And our job is to make sure we'll try everything we can to ensure that you don't reoffend. So sometimes hostility can be up there, but we tend to try and get it down because it's someone, if somebody's subject to notification requirements for 10 years, it can be a long, difficult 10 years if someone keeps that hostility there of not allowing somebody in, not trying to engage professionally with us. So those are our sort of, there's one more that's a big risk factor, which will come into number 8, but we start looking at protective factors as well. So we can look at poor self-management. So is someone's life chaotic, impulsive lifestyle resulting in either stress, boredom, reckless choices, or intentional exposure to negative influences? I think we can all have little bits of that in our life. You know, we'd love to have a real structured life and our management is fantastic and we get up and we know what we're doing and we use our time to the best. I'm terrible sometimes at putting things off, and then things go by and you just sort of make choices which you don't think are right. So it's something we can all look at, but really getting somebody's life in order to say where you guys come in and circles of support is so key with poor self-management. If you sit down with somebody for, you know, an hour every week and what have you done this week, for somebody to be saying what they've done and actually opening it up really does sometimes allow people to say, yeah, you're quite right, I don't do much with my week, I could be doing more, or I could be using it more effectively. Someone is poor at regulating feelings and lacks abilities to cope with life's problems. I met somebody today and it's just the same time, whereas you can never sort of say, well, okay, I need to deal with this, I need to cope with this problem. Just an ongoing sort of inability to cope with it really, or plan effectively and take responsibility for your actions and basically own your own problems. Not looking to blame others for find solutions and struggles with positive self-motivation. I think one of the key things with the starters sometimes in circles is we see poor self-management as quite a concern. But the ones that I've been involved in, by the time I come out of it after the 12 months, there's normally a vast improvement here. And that's credit to you guys being able to, you know, get somebody to see what they've got in their life, what they can have, and promoting it. So thank you for that. Moving on, social influences. As we said, again, this is another thing general in life. If we surround ourselves by good people, there's a chance that we'll behave in a better way. Surround ourselves by negative people, there's more of a chance we'll behave that way. There is risk factors, obviously, if we surround ourselves by bad people, you know, people who approve or tolerate of antisocial or criminal behavior. But also what is a big risk factor is loneliness, is that person who has nobody. I know people will say, look, I don't want to mix with people, I'm worried about what's going on, but more people will isolate themselves. The longer that goes on, the more difficult it is for them to get back into the social scene. And moving on to another big factor is the commitment to desist. It's having a tool, having a toolbox, whatever, however the person wants to describe it, of not reoffending, not going back to that life. It might not be as clear cut as saying, I offended, I'm not going to offend anymore. It's where was that person's life when they did it? You know, were they going through a real difficult time? Were the other categories that they had just now, were they spiraling out of control? Were they drinking, taking drugs? Were they homeless? Family breakup? All those things. They could say, do you know what, that's where I was then. This is all about a person becoming a new person, a new non-offender. Having the tools to say, I know the risks. You know, people may say to you, I have a sexual attraction to children. I know I've always got that. It's about having tools to be able to say how I deal with it. We have some people who have say, I know that if I see a child of this age and this person, I will turn around and stop and walk away, because that's their way of dealing with that sexual attraction. So it's about distancing themselves from the past, putting things in place. Again, where you come in brilliantly, helping people to say, you know, how can you move forward? How can you get on with this? Giving someone meaningful goals, and looking at taking steps to achieve them. Intimate relationship. That's not solely about whether that person's got a partner. This can be a sibling, this can be a son, daughter, this can be a parent, this can be a intimate wife, husband, partner, or it can be a really, really close friend that you may have gone back to, you know, back to school, and you're now 40, 50, and you'd confide in that person more than you'd confide in your partner, your parent, your son, daughter. So if anybody has got that in their relationship and it's deemed that it's not conflicted with somebody that they're in a relationship with, and there's violence and there's infidelity, but having that somebody there that, again, it's somebody that involves in having a close, valued and meaningful, intimate relationship. So it doesn't mean sexual, it's just a close, intimate relationship with someone who's a pro-social. So going back to the last couple of categories before, we've got social influences. This is about having a relationship with positive people. The person knows them and can provide healthy emotional and practical support that is congruent with supporting positive change. This is all about that person has got someone that they can speak to, they can confide in, but also the protective factor here is that person does not want to lose this. If this person went on to reoffend, they could well lose the person that said, I've stuck by you. I'll give you that second chance. But they know that if it was, they were to break, you know, if they were to reoffend, they'd lose that relationship. But the risk factor is somebody who has nobody and doesn't want anybody, because they will say, no, nobody will love me because of what I've done. They're labeling themselves when actually, if they look, there may well be someone there. And if they do have someone there, this is a real big factor in having a protective net around them to protect them from reoffending. Employment or positive routine. So it's not just in relation to someone having a job. Someone who has a job and has a little bit of a purpose, so that's something to get somebody up in the morning, or a positive routine that they're not lounging around in bed, you know, going a bit semi-nocturnal because they just can't be bothered to get out. It's all about having something that's given them a bit of a purpose, a job that where they get a bit of pride with it. Again, another huge factor in being protective and not reoffending. And we go on to the final one, which is social investment, giving something back. So this is someone who's got a psychological maturity. They tend to want to give something back. So they want to contribute to future generations, really for what they've done. So a lot of people will say to us, look, I've spent my time offending, I've done this, I've done that, I've been through the criminal justice system. It's my time, I'd actually quite like to give something back, and whether that's volunteering, or whether that's mentoring people, you know, if they're at work, they're the ones that go a little bit above and beyond, or contribute to their society, their family, their community. You know, they're the one person that will go a bit above and beyond. And it's that feeling of self-esteem really contributes to someone's self-worth. Okay. So we look at all those factors, those 11 categories. And as you can probably sort of see, that that's not a 5-minute discussion with somebody. And it can be quite hard for someone to rake up, you know, some sensitive things that have happened. And it's not something we sort of go into lightly. We say to people, we're going to talk about some difficult, you know, sort of subjects. And it can be quite emotional, because we can be raking up past issues with family members if, you know, if they haven't spoken to their children or parents for many years, and we ask why, and it can be very difficult for them. So at the end of it, we then will do an assessment on somebody's risk of reoffending. Now that can go between low, medium or high. We rate all our categories either low, medium or high. And then following looking at them, we don't just go on there's 6 low, so he has to be low, because that's more than anything else. It depends on where the risk is. So we have to look at this person's offending, and if the risks are in those factors, and not in the protective factors, then we might be looking at medium or higher risk of reoffending. Predominantly, someone should be at a higher risk, and as time goes by, they should drop off. We can put actions in place, which are what we call SMART, which means it's an acronym for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and have a timescale. So if somebody is looking at a lot of pornography on their devices, we will say to them, cut that back. Let's see if you can limit your time over a period of 2 months, and we can see whether that's achievable for someone to do it. And if it is, it's something that we keep working with them. And then the next time we see the assessment, we see either a positive in that action, or if they said, oh no, I did it for a few weeks, but I've gone back to looking at how it was before, we could say, well, look, how else can we deal with this problem? At the end of it, then we come up with a rating of low, medium, high, or very high. So low is where we would love everybody to be. Unfortunately, they're not. Medium, and then we have high and very high. There are a few, I'll look up on the board, and I think there's 300 odd in our office that we deal with, people with sexual convictions that we manage. I think only 1 or 2 are managed at very high. They are people that we think are an imminent risk of reoffending, really. And from that, I'll take that off sharing. And yeah, from that assessment, we will look at someone, how often they are seen, which can be from anything from weekly, monthly, right down to as little as 12 monthly. So that's really what I think we do as police. It's a massive thank you from me to you guys for what you do, because you give up your time to help people that I manage, and from the circles of support and accountability that I've been involved in, I've seen nothing but positives at the end. And it's real warming feeling to, at the end of that 12 months, see the progress that person has made in the 12 months that they've been in that circle. And I really do get a feeling of a system that works. I've been doing this since 2017, and I don't think I could do it if it was something that I didn't think was worth it. Our percentages of people reoffending is lower than any other sort of category of crime, really, that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. I mean, by like shoplifting, burglaries, violence. And I think that is mainly because I think what people have done, the majority of people don't like what they've done, and they don't want to reoffend. So when people do come to you and say, I don't want to reoffend, I think the majority of it really do mean it. And I think it would be down to myself and or probation, colleagues, if you thought someone was at risk of reoffending and weren't ready for your input, we'd probably like to hold back a little bit. But yeah, thank you for what you do. And if you have any questions, I'm happily, if I can, answer them, or if not, maybe get back to you at a later date.
That's wonderful, Mark. Thank you very much. Right, guys, this is your opportunity to ask Mark anything that you want to. So if you can either raise the hand icon, if you're technologically genius, or just unmute yourself and shout out, which I expect most of us will do. Philippa, don't disappoint me. You can start us off.
Why me?
Because you always got such great questions, my dear.
One question I do have for Mark is MAPA.
Yes.
I've known about MAPA. I'm a retired magistrate, so I've known about MAPA for a very long time.
Fantastic.
Can you tell me what sort of agencies partake? I know it's the police and social services. Who else is involved?
Yeah, it could be a number. So I think of a form we have what we call it. See if I can see here the statutory agencies that are there. No, it's not. It'll be naturally police. It'll be probation. depending on someone's living situation, it may be housing, it can be social services, it can be GP, mental health. Really, it's open for us to invite many agencies. So it can go from housing, can go to schools.
Do you all get together sort of round a table? Well, as a Zoom call now, presumably.
Yeah. We always used to cram into a small room, and then the way that it works is the agency that feels that the risk needs to be heightened as a person that refers it in. So that could either be police and or probation. It can be a joint thing. So that person will refer into a MAPA panel, and in that MAPA panel is a senior probation officer and a police inspector and a third party. They decide whether that matter meets the threshold, because they could say, well, yeah, you've got a concern about someone's high risk, but managing him by police and probation is ample. Don't just bring it into it because you're worried about this person. If you can deal with the worries outside and the risks outside, fine. But if I've got somebody who's subject of community mental health team, they would be, so we will look at each case individually. So we can have up to 10, 15 people. It may even be someone like yourselves from chaplaincies can come in, because they can act as someone of support and they can give a broad picture. It's not all about saying what we do to find a house, find this. It may be people who work with them who say, I can come in and give you a real good picture of what this person, of where they are in their life. So yeah, so many agencies, but always specific to there. So there's not a tick off list, but there's, it's specific to that person.
And is it presumably each of the clients are reviewed on a regular basis?
Yes, so they'll have an initial meeting, and then the chair will decide whether it needs to continue. If they need to continue, agencies will get given actions which they're accountable for. They go off and do them, and if they think, okay, that's do them, and then if they're done, it's closed. But it can roll on. We've had some high risk people that have gone on 10, 12 meetings every couple of months. Some you move in 2 or 3, we sort our issue out, and then we can always sort of like reduce back to just standard management between probation and police.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else before I jump in? So Mark, we'll have some people watching this who haven't been in a circle yet, and have just joined, or in the last sort of 12 months haven't been in the circle yet. Can you explain how the involvement of MOSOVOs in a circle? Do you attend meetings? How is it that we are integrated together?
Okay, so once a circle referral is made and is agreed, excuse me, we will go to an initial members. I know. How do you refer to the people? How do you refer to yourselves, the people that volunteer? Are you cool?
So yeah, we have a core member and the volunteers surrounding them. Yes,
core member and the volunteers. So yeah, we will make referral, and once it's agreed, who the circle volunteers are, we will come along to an initial meet. So before the person starts the circle, we will come along and have a chat, give our reasons for why the referral was made, give our concerns, and also where we would like it going and why we've done it. So we will always give I always give my details to say, look, if ever you've got a question and you think, I'm really, really worried about this person, then you can always give us a call. It's looking at, if we can look at those risk factors, it's dealing with them and explaining what they are, and looking at the protective factors, and then answering any questions with regards to risk or where we want this to go. And then the following week is normally an introduction, because it will be myself, and if it's a probation a person as well, they can then introduce the core member to the group, which is normally a very, very anxious time for the core member. And then we then get the minutes to each meeting that somebody will take. There'll be to the coordinator, then they get forwarded on to us, and then we come along. Well, I go along every quarter, so we'll go along every 3 months and have a review to see how things are progressing. If things need to steer in a certain direction, or if it's all going well, you know, let's promote that positivity all the way through, right up to the last one. And I can't believe how quick the 12 months goes. To have the final one, I can't believe we were sat here 12 months ago with this person who was probably in a real anxious way, and hopefully we see the result that the person has developed into a more of a positive place in their life.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Right.
Hello, Kathy.
Is this arms that
Yeah.
you use, is that replacing Oasis, or is it as well as Oasis?
Ah, someone has a bit of knowledge of probation there. Is that right?
Afraid so.
Yeah. So
many years ago.
Yeah. What I don't want to do is talk about an Oasis assessment, which is something that probation will do. Ideally, an Oasis assessment is something of regards to general reoffending. The arms is specifically detailed to people with sexual convictions. Probation will do the Oasis assessment, but that's, because I say, it's like a general document that they do. But we ourselves, it's not being replaced. So in an ideal world, they will do an Oasis plus a arms assessment. But if you can imagine the amount of work that's involved in that, I don't think you'd ever get out of the office.
No.
So the arms is solely for someone with a sexual conviction. Doesn't replace the Oasis, but it should be used as the primary assessment.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Sandy.
Hi.
Oh yeah.
I'm down in Cornwall. I just wondered how widespread you think the understanding of circles is in your neck of the woods. We're in a circle currently where our client is a lifer, and his probation officer is up country, quite a long way away, and we're tucked right down the end of Cornwall. And there's been some friction because I think he doesn't understand how circles operates. And I just wondered, you know, whether you feel it's a part of your working life for your whole force, or whether it's in particular areas, or whether it's up to the individual to find out.
When you say the individual, that the individual doesn't really know how it works, but they've been referred into services of support.
Yes, I
but it's
know.
never really been explained to them what they're signing up for.
Yes, I think it's yes, I think there's a, you know, distance doesn't help. And obviously we don't know what's happening the other end. We're just seeing this end of things. But I just wondered, as a, you know, would you say that in your area everyone's very au fait with how circles is, or?
I think Exeter is really good. I can only speak for the area that I work in, but I'd happily, if you want to speak to Lisa, I'd happily link in with my supervisors down in Cornwall, and if there are some concerns, maybe they should be addressing them, because there's no point in referring somebody into a 12-month program if you've got you know, the person doesn't really know what they're there for, as it hasn't really been explained, because you're on a bit of a back foot there, I know. But if you want to go through Lucy, I'd happily speak to my sort of equivalents down there. I take it this person has a MOSOVO?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what,
I mean, obviously it's a complicated situation. It's just an example. It's not the first time we've had someone whose probation officer is you know, a distance away, and it does produce a little bit of a disconnect.
Yeah, and what I would say about that, because how far down in Cornwall are you?
Well, we meet in Camborne, which is south of Truro.
Yeah. Well, no, I know it very well. I'm a Penzance boy.
Oh, wow. Yeah, good.
But our teams are there really good. And normally what would happen is if somebody's subject of a life license and they've moved from wherever their probation, the case should either be transferred or it should be being managed, or like sort of temporarily fostered, as we would like to say, by an offender manager there from probation. So
I think the problem is because of his MAPA status, and he's in the AP at the moment, so he's technically homeless. They're saying
sorry, you
that
just
he's
broke
got
up
to
a
be
little bit.
housed. Sorry, they're just saying he's got to be housed
Yeah.
before they transfer the case. So, but I just putting it in the context, I've been doing circles for over 10 years now, and I feel that the professional involvement from police and probation is much less than it used to be. But I also know that everyone's workloads are massively higher than they used to be. And we meet in the evenings. So, you know, there's lots and lots of factors involved. I'm just interested in getting a picture of you know, whether circles is just a part of culture for police and probation, or whether it's, you know,
sorry, I can only speak for me. If I sign refer somebody in, I sort of sign up to it as well. It's a 12-month thing for all of us. It's not just a tick box that I'm aware of, or myself and my colleagues, as I can only speak from Exeter. We don't refer it in unless we're prepared to go to all the meetings and go through the 12 months with that person, because sometimes the person can go and you can go to meet them and they're really good because they've had a good circles meeting, or they might be a bit, you know, down because they've had to talk about stuff about their past. There's a bit of a journey to be gone with them, really.
Absolutely.
And if you do have any concerns, I mean, please just do a general thing, because you might be people saying, I didn't realise it, you know. But if you've got any issues, please go through Lucy, and I'll happily address them with the sergeants down there. Okay. Hi, Sam.
Hiya. Sorry if you've already answered this or mentioned it, but how often do you do the arms assessment with someone? Is it kind of regularly or just once?
No, so it's something we do. Visits are different than arms, so we may go and speak to somebody who's high risk, and we may look at seeing them every month, every couple of months, depending on where they are, or that can vary. So whether somebody is high, medium, or low, we do the arms assessment once a year, unless there's a significant change or event in their life. Now that could be for a risk coming in. So somebody may be starting a relationship that has a child, starting a relationship with a partner that has a child. That could be deemed as a risk. So that may be a significant change. Someone losing their job, someone breaking up a relationship, that could be deemed as a significant change, moving house. If that is the case, sometimes we could do arms 2 to 3 times a year. But yeah, it's normally done once a year, and then we review it as we go through each visit, which may be, you may be doing 10 visits a year, but if things don't significantly change, we just do it once a year, the actual assessment, which is great for me because it's quite a big admin task, especially when you're a slow typer like me as well.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's why I wondered if it was quite frequent or not, but that's great. Thank you.
All right.
That's wonderful. Anyone else? This is your one chance. Let's make the most of having Mark Weir with us. Any other questions for him? No? Okay, that's wonderful. Well, as Mark said, if you want to ask him anything else, or if there's anything specific that you think he could help you with, just email me or go through your coordinator. We'd be more than happy to pass on your comments or questions. But thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're going to finish a little bit early, to the relief of probably everybody who would like to go and have their dinner. Mark, thank you so much again for joining us. It's just been really, really great to hear your experiences and everything that you do. We thank you very much for being so involved. And do apologise for the noise my end. That's my dog.
Oh, no.
So thank you again for being with us, and lovely to see you all. Have a safe and wonderful evening, and I will catch up with you in the next training.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. That's really appreciated. Thank you. And thanks for all what you guys do as well.